Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the last day of the virtual Sustainable Agriculture Conference. We're so happy you're here today on this beautiful Sunday morning. You are now joining the session, Cultivating Mushrooms on Pasteurized and Sterilized Substrates. Wow, it's a mouthful. Sorry about that. As you've had through this whole conference, we encourage you to please engage in the chat, ask questions in the chat, introduce yourself there. We can see that come through on our end and can answer them throughout the presentation or at the end. We do have a sponsor for this session, SCSARE. So we want to thank them for their support for this session and this conference. And I also have a short video clip to play from them before we get started. So here we go. Awesome. Thank you again, South Carolina Sarah, for your support. And without further ado, I'm going to bring in our speaker. Welcome, Trad. How are you? Happy Sunday. Good morning.
Hello. Good morning.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to go ahead and bring in your screen. Here we go. All right. And Trad, I'll be here in the background if you need me for anything, but I'm going to hand it over to you.
Sounds good. All right, everybody. Thanks for coming today to my talk. We're going to cover a lot of things about mushroom cultivation and on pasteurized and also some sterilized substrates in the end. There's two separate slideshows. What I'll do is I'll get through this one and maybe I'll stop share. We'll take a few questions and then I'll get onto the sterilized substrates. That makes more sense to kind of split them up. So we'll go ahead and get started here. First of all, I've been growing mushrooms for eons. I just turned 48. So it's 28 years, almost 29 of cultivation. I can grow mushrooms on just about anything. I've tried everything. This is mushrooms growing off of peanut hulls. If you don't have it, shameless self-promotion, but it actually helps if you have a guide. And that's my book there. I'll put it back up at the end. Mushroom farming and micromediation, lots of interesting things in there. First of all, I'd like to start out with the 7 stages of mushroom cultivation in order to understand how a mushroom grows. Here, we're not covering log cultivation today. We did that yesterday. Media preparation, you have to know what a mushroom wants to eat. You know, what is it like to grow on? So that could be pasteurization or sterilization. You just basically prepare the dinner. You mix the spawn or the culture with that food source, and then it needs time to run through that food source. A mushroom does not fruit until it's done colonizing something. So as long as it's still feeding, it's not going to fruit. And then once it's complete, it'll get some environmental factors we'll talk about, like light, oxygen, and moisture, and simulating just the natural cycles outdoors. Then it'll fruit, and then it'll rest for a couple weeks, and then it'll fruit and rest and fruit and rest. These are called flushes. All right. And again, you can grow mushrooms in just about anything. Or growing mushrooms on pizza boxes and stuff like that. We covered that yesterday, and it's in the book. But mushrooms on jeans. And here's some mushrooms I found down in Haiti off of a mango tree, some oyster mushrooms. So we're wonderful, absolutely wonderful. But, how do you take these mushrooms and amplify them, into bulk substrates? And here's some of my students. We taught them how to take those mushrooms, wrap them up in cardboard, and make cardboard spawn like this. And this is in my book here. And you just basically take stems of oyster mushrooms, wrap them up in cardboard. Now you have spawn. Now, once you have spawn, you can buy bags of spawn like you see here. It's a 5-pound bag of spawn. You can make more spawn either in coffee grounds or shredded. What is this? This is wood chips from a cabinet maker, and you can expand it tenfold. And so what happens here is, the growing media here, it represents, trash and, cardboard, clothing. But we're going to be discussing agricultural byproducts this morning. So essentially, what you can do is grow mushrooms on media and then create soil. And then that produces mushrooms. You can use this to filter water and such, and also make soil. But each one of these, you can perpetuate the culture back. And that's what I want to get through today, is that even without a laboratory, you can buy a bag of spawn, expand it onto coffee grounds or paper, cardboard, wood shavings, even straw, and then you get one bucket. So I just want to explain this really quickly because it gets out of hand, which I like. I don't have a problem with it. You can take one bucket and then make 10 buckets the next week. Then you take the pick of the litter, and then you can make another 10 out of here. So then you have 9 left over, 9 buckets, but then you can make 10 fruiting cultures or fruiting pots or bags out of each one of those. So 9 times 10 is 90. So every week you can have a potential of 90 fruiting kits, which is it is a lot. So we're going to start back here with pasteurization and how to grow mushrooms first. If you've never grown mushrooms before, it's really easy. These are pink oyster mushrooms. They have as much protein, calorie for calorie, as chicken or eggs. They don't have the fat. It's a wonderful tropical mushroom. And there's blue oyster and golden oysters. So we're going to concentrate on the oyster group this morning. And then also, mushrooms need light, and typically they need blue LED lights work actually best. And this is really good because Christmas is coming up and there's blue LED string lights everywhere for sale. And they also, at a colder temperature, they get a darker pigmentation, which means there might be higher in vitamin D. So the longer they're exposed to light, the more that they synthesize vitamin D. And if you've never grown oyster mushrooms before, this is about a 3-week-old bag. They emerge from the holes, and then from here to here is only about 6 to 12 hours. It's really, really fast. And I'll get into why these are trapped here, why you don't want to let those out. I talked about that yesterday, but I'll talk about that here right near the end. And oyster mushrooms are some of the easiest mushrooms to grow. So what we're going to concentrate on today is cereal straw. You can grow them on coffee, cotton waste, all these different things. But it has to be carbon rich. So cereal straw is where we want to start. And oat, wheat, or rye. You don't want to use hay, Bermuda grass, anything. You want a cereal straw. It needs to be shredded. I mean, you could also use vegetation, but it's very high in nitrogen. You can use that to mix it in. I've used water hyacinth that's dried in tropical environments. I've used kudzu mixed in with straw. You can't grow mushrooms on kudzu 100% because it's very high in nitrogen, but you can mix it in with a straw. So if you're going to pasteurize anything, I would start with a bale of, let's say, wheat straw. And sometimes you can find these pre-shredded and baled, and they're nice and fluffy, but you need a fluffy straw. So use either a shredder or something to shred them with. This is right out of the bale. This is shredded here, nice and fluffy. You want that mycelium to be able to bridge the gaps here as best possible. So when you stuff this into a bag or a container, it doesn't spring back. If you stuff this into a bag or container, it just doesn't, there's a lot of airspace and it won't fruit very well. So yeah, this nobody's going to have one of these, but this is what farmers use to shred up their material. I would just use a regular shredder. The growers over in Europe, this is interesting. They actually shred straw and they leave it out. They wet it for maybe a week, and they let it kind of pre-compost a little bit. And what that does is it allows the straw to the bacteria to eat away that waxy, shiny cuticle that's on the straw. If you look at wheat straw, for instance, it's not dull. It's very shiny, and that's a natural plant hydrocarbon. So the bacteria will eat that away, and it'll make it easier for the mushroom mycelium to eat later. So this is not necessary. You don't have to do this, but it's obviously helpful to shred it, maybe wet it, leave it out for a couple days, and then you're going to pasteurize it. I've been using hemp waste. This is hemp herds, HURDS, and this is hemp bedding or animal bedding for, say, horses or chickens, guinea pigs, whatever you have. This is very high in cellulose, and look at this, it's already shredded. It's already a perfect shred, and it holds a lot of moisture, and it's very high in cellulose, which is what we want. It's very high in carbon. So I've been using this experimentally and getting really good yields. So if you want to try growing mushrooms, such as oyster mushrooms, on either wheat straw or hemp herds, works really well. All right, so there's a couple different methods of pasteurization. We're going to go through a couple of them. Pasteurization, that is with heat. What you're going to do is heat up water to I get it up to about 180, because when you submerge the straw or the hemp, the temperature goes down. All right, you can do this in great barrels. You can do it on the stove with a big crock pot or turkey frying pot. You're going to submerge it heat up the water first. Then you're going to submerge your media. It's going to want to float, so you're going to have to put something inside on top, and then you're going to weigh it down so it goes under the bubbling water. You're going to submerge it for 1 to 2 hours. So it's like making pasta, but you're cooking it for 1 to 2 hours. Then you're going to take it out, and then you're going to drain it. And then while the water's still hot, you can stick some more media in there. You can do that twice, because it turns into like this tea. Then you're going to take it out, put it aside, let it drain. If you were doing this in your kitchen, you would just clean out your sink really well and just dump it in there and let it drain. If you've got a couple big pots, you can just dump it in your bathtub. If you were on a farm, you would lay out a nice clean tarp and dump a lot of media on a tarp or a table. This one's interesting. And if you don't want to use hot water, you can use lime. This is hydrated lime. And what you want is hydrated lime, calcium hydroxide. And this is lime. If you have to look at the label, if you do this, the magnesium has to be less than 4 or 5%. So it has to be almost pure calcium. And you want to wear a mask and gloves when you do this. This stuff will burn. Now, what's fine, but you don't want to inhale this. And you just put, 1 cup for every 10 gallons of water. And it goes way up. Actually, it won't go to 9. It'll go to like 11 or 12. You put in your straw or your waste, and you soak it overnight. And the morning time, it is buffered down to about 8. And then then you could spawn it. The other one is peroxide. I'm not going to get into this one. This was in my book. It's not really worthwhile, but it does exist. You can look up peroxide. You would take over-the-counter peroxide, 3%, and dilute it 10 to 1, and then soak your media. That's on a very small scale, almost like classroom scale. Then you spawn when it's drained. This one is for this one is for any of those who are into adventure. Anaerobic treatment. You're going to take your straw, soak it for a week in cold water outdoors. And let me tell you something. It is going to reek. It's going to totally go into a bacterial bloom. And that's what pasteurizes essentially. It's just going to coat and go anaerobic. And basically there's going to be no molds or anything in there. And then you're going to drain it. Good luck. Don't let the stuff get on you because it is smelly. But, you know, it's free energy. I mean, it doesn't require any lime. It doesn't require any heat. You just drain it and then you spawn it and put it in a container. So let's look at the hot water bath, which is the most reasonable and sure way to do it. These are 255-gallon food grade drums. I heat up the water. I drop in my straw. These are just some cages I made with aluminum, and then this is plastic wire that I have, almost like netting that you get at Lowe's or Home Depot or Ace, something like that. And then once it's heated up, I drop it in. You can see the bricks on top, so it weighs it down. It goes down under the water. The water is about the second line. And then once it's down, I just lock or put a lid on. I lock the top. Now, I don't keep the heat going, obviously, with the lid lock. All right, that would create pressure. This is right before I add more bricks. I'm just going to push this down until the bubbling with the straw. You can't have dry straw here. This will contaminate everything if you don't have it below the water. So you want to make sure that this is pushing down and you have water, hot water on top. If you get to this point and you say, hey, you know, I pushed as hard as I can, take this brick out, take the grill out, and remove the straw until you hit water, and then put the brick back, because you need everything to go underwater. I mean, I've done that. I've overpacked a straw basket and didn't have enough water, so I had to remove some straw. If you're using a barrel, I mean, electric winches. And here we've got, you see the barrels over here in the baskets. This is just a clean tarp, and we spray a diluted bleach solution on it, and then we just lay it out here, let it drain, let it cool off, and then we just take a 1 bag of spawn, of sawdust spawn, you see, break it up, and you're just going to crumble it over the top of the entire media and mix it. Now, anything you use to mix, like a rake, I mean, this should be exclusive to the mushroom operation. You should not be using garden. This is a brand new, and we spray this with diluted bleach or alcohol, and then we mix everything together and then bag it. And we'll talk about containers in a second. So mushrooms produce heat, carbon dioxide, and they sweat. So they need oxygen to fruit. So it needs breathing holes, whether it's plastic or container. You've got to have breathing holes. So if this is a plastic bag, there's a breathing hole, like a knife slit, cut every 6 to 8 inches. So what are the types of spawn you can get? You've got supplemented sawdust spawn. It's inexpensive. There's a lot of little inoculation points. Every little piece of sawdust has fungus in it. It doesn't attract insects as much as grain, and it stores for months. It does have a slower to medium leap off than grain. All right, grain's expensive. It does not last very long in the fridge. Contaminates easy, but if you have access to fresh grain, you could use that. And it also is used as a supplement to the media, because you're adding grain to, say, straw. That's a good thing. I like to use supplemented sawdust, supplement the actual straw with maybe a nitrogen source, maybe something small, maybe a little peanut hay or something like that. All right, so there's the sawdust spawn inoculant you see there. Now it's expanding. This is sawdust here, and it's radiating outward. And you have all these little armies of cells spread out in the straw, and it's looking for its friends. They're just going to compete, battle its way, find each other. But here's the one thing, especially with growing and during the summer, you got to be careful. Remember, mushrooms create heat, carbon dioxide, and they sweat. So I would get a probe thermometer, and they're going to add anywhere from 10 to 15 degrees internal temperature to the bags. Now, the number I want you to remember is 105 degrees. 105 degrees is when mushroom cultures can get damaged for a prolonged period of time. So As these temperatures are increasing, I mean, if you try to do this in a 90-degree greenhouse, add 15 degrees to that, that's 105. So you risk a lot of that culture maybe dying. So you have to, during the colonization phase only, when they're taking over their food source, you want to keep it at 70 to 75 degrees. That way the internal temperature can be 90, so you have a buffer. Once it's fully cultured, it goes down inside. So you can move it to a warmer place. But during colonization, just be careful. Internal thermogenesis is what it's called. So here they are, just colonizing along. I mean, this room was 70 degrees, and now inside this bag is 85. Had I put this bag in an 85 or 90-degree colonization space while it's colonizing, it would be at 100, 105, which would be very dangerous for the culture. So keep it cool during colonization. And then bagging, and then they'll come out. This is a mixture of shredded wheat straw. All the black stuff you see in here is cottonseed hulls, and that's one of my favorite formulas. You can get that at feed stores if you special order it. I could see it's marbled here. For every 1 bale of wheat straw, I use a 50-pound bag or 40 or 50-pound bag of cottonseed hulls. I mix it. That's a really good formula if you're doing this. These bags can be ordered at Uline. It's poly tubing. Cut it, tie a knot, and then fill it with your spawned pasteurized. Tie another knot, and then poke holes 8 inches. You see them here. You do that right when you make them, and then they turn all white. They look like cured sausages. Now, as soon as they turn white, you're going to spray this with water, these holes, and then the mushrooms come out fairly quickly. Once they turn all white, they're coming out. Here's one of the tubes being filled. You can see the spawn going in here in time. They've mixed it up. At the end of a table, we've got a little, almost like a frame or something here. They can put the plastic over and just stuff it in. Now, it's not just going to fall in here. You want to tamp it. So you might need like a tool or the end of a rake or something to tamp this and force it down. And you want to compact this as tight as you can. And here's some comparison. This is unshredded straw here. You can see how big the fibers are, and the mushrooms are small, they're big, they're all over the place. And here's shredded straw on the right. Absolutely just beautiful, the culture, the clusters are almost the same size. It's much more homogeneous here with this shredded straw and cotton mixture compared to just unshredded straw here. Okay. Here's the problem. All right, so you have holes spread out 6 to 8 inches apart. And mushrooms are attracted to light because they like light. They're phototropic. Some mushroom strains are photosensitive, so you get these mushrooms that are trapped under the plastic. I mean, look at their little faces. They're all wet. Just faces are pressed up against the plastic, starving for air, and they're looking at you like, please. I don't know how many of you are parents, but if you have children and you're looking at this, I mean, you've got to be thinking, my God, I got to let them out. Here's the fact of the matter. Don't do it. Leave them under there. I know it's hard to watch because I've done it for years. It's sad to watch, but you're going to have to let these die. They'll actually be reabsorbed by the mycelium. They're going to just shrivel up and rechannel their energy to the ones that made it out of the holes. Don't let these out because they're going to steal energy from the bag or the column or whatever container you make, and the yield is going to go way down. So just let these go. Now, if they're attracted to light, what's the solution here? Maybe clear plastic is not the right idea. So you switch to black plastic instead. That way they're not stimulated by light at all, right? And, excuse me. That way they're just coming out of the holes, they're just attracted to the oxygen, and that's it. All right, so that's the solution. So opaque containers or opaque plastic, like you see here. This is black poly tubing. So years ago, I switched from clear to black. Pink oyster mushrooms growing in my little cold frame. These are wooden frame out in the woods. I only have a fan and a Carolina, like a humidifier cooler, swamp cooler. On this day, it was 105 degrees outside in South Carolina. And it's in the shade, but it's still hot. It still gets a little bit of sun. So 105, I put a reflective shade cloth on top. It went down to 90. And then I turned on this one fan and the kind of cooler, which is a swamp cooler, and the temperature in was 78 degrees. 78, perfect. Perfect for mushrooms on a 105 degree Carolina day, right? After these mushrooms were done, just a little bonus, these pink oyster mushrooms fruited 7 times. And when they were done, I added some red wiggler worms to the columns, and then it composted the pasteurized media in here. And then it went into October, November, and they got cool. So I just started adding greens to here. So I had some leafy greens growing vertically for the winter, which is a nice thing to do. Yeah, little bonus. And then this is cottonseed hulls here. And I was growing golden oyster mushrooms. These only took 10 days to fruit. So if you're looking for some instant satisfaction, this is not like planting tomatoes or anything else. This is fast. So all was soak cottonseed hulls from the feed store in hot water for 2 hours, drain it, mix it with golden oyster sawdust spawn, and dump it into buckets and just stack the buckets. And that's it. I mean, it can't get any easier than that. I mean, I tell people, I was like, listen, if you can make spaghetti or if you can heat up water without burning it, you can grow mushrooms, especially this way. Even if you don't shred it, I mean, if you just pack the hell out of it into these pots, you know, you're going to get production. I mean, if it's not shredded, you're hard. But ideally, you want something that's shredded. Your yield would go way high. But this is unshredded. I did this after the earthquake in Haiti several years ago. And just to test it, just to see if, hey, if it wasn't shredded, if we just did the best with what we have and we just pack it, what would happen? Well, this is what happened. And this is super easy. And then, you know, you can pick all these mushrooms off and let it rest and then water it. And 2 to 3 weeks later, it's going to 3, 4, 5 times, you know, until it's just kind of spent. I like the nursery pots because the plastic is a problem in mushroom production. There's a lot of it. So these are reusable. These are for 7-gallon nursery pots, but you could see here how we took a carpenter knife and we made an X or a slit in the sides, and they'll actually push through that. You see this. Oyster mushrooms can lift about 80 pounds per square inch, so they're going to come out of that little slit, which is kind of nice. So if you do this, slits in the side, and stack them up, and you've got tons of mushrooms fruiting out of the side. Again, let's just to rewind, shredded wheat straw or cotton in hot water for 2 hours, drain it, mix it with spawn, and dump it into buckets and stack it. I mean, it's really not that hard. I mean, everybody should be growing mushrooms like this. Another cool is storage containers. I like this one here. And I saw this by a Russian grower years ago, and we started doing this at the farm. It was highly effective, and it's so easy because these are all reusable. Once you buy them, they're reusable. There's no plastic waste, and a lot into a container at once. So these are pre-drilled holes. You would just dump your spawn media in there, let it sit in a room for maybe 2 weeks, and then move it into a space where you can water it, and boom, they're coming out. So here's our space. We do a lot of research at the farm, and then we fill the bins, and then with what's left over, with what will not fit in a bin, we just put into a couple bags. And what these are like indicator bags. So this tells us what's going on in these bins, so we don't have to open them. You know, they're white and colonized, they start fruiting like this. These are brand new ones. They're not colonized yet, so nothing's going as well. The holes are pre-drilled, as you see here. Now, you do not have to water these at all. Like once you stuff your spawn into a bag and poke holes, or you stuff it into these containers, you do not water the holes. You do not water the slits. You light. And as soon as it turns all white, you water the holes. And what that does is it rehydrates the holes, and it also draws, it cools off those holes, drops the temperature, and then the mushrooms emerge because they feel safe, just like they would after a rain outdoors. So we water the holes. When the babies come out, you gotta water them, all right? But don't overwater them. Don't coat them with water 24 hours a day. You actually suffocate them, because a mushroom is like a snorkel. They need to breathe through that mushroom. All right, so this maybe 3 weeks ago. Again, you know, and it's okay. They're not going to come out of every single hole. They kind of figure out which holes they want to come out of. But you're going to water everything, and you're going to water these babies maybe twice a day. And then from here to here is only about 3 to 4 days. And these are a little bit overgrown. We might have let this go too long. Maybe we came in on a Monday, and nobody was watching them for 2 days. I like to, you know, maybe drop the temperature in the fruiting room. This is just a cinder block fruiting room, nothing special. I'll show you some of our humidifiers, but you can also use buckets. I love buckets. If you just want to pasteurize a little bit of straw or cotton, I know you can go to Tractor Supply and you can buy shredded wheat straw that they use for reseeding grass. It's already shredded, and they also use it for bedding. And it's beautiful. It's fluffy, and you can just boil up a big pot of hot water in your kitchen, submerge some of that straw, dump it in your sink. You know, the oyster mushroom spawn 5-pound bag will do like 200 pounds of wet straw. So you can just take out a cup or two of that, roll it back up, put it in the fridge, spawn everything in the sink, and make a bucket. You know, you can make it 1 bucket a week. If you do 1 bucket a week, you could potentially be growing 8 to 13 pounds of mushrooms a week in a space. You know, your patio, your garage, you know. So I want to talk about inter-kingdom interactions right now. These are mushrooms that respond to, well, they need bacteria or some other organisms to fruit. And this would include mushrooms like white button, portobello, king Stropharia, blue. Olga just texted me pictures at the house. We're finding bluets now, which is great. That's a fall winter mushroom stimulated by cold, but it also needs a bacterial trigger to fruit. Where do all your little white button mushrooms and portobellos come from, huh? This is all pasteurized straw and manure and straw that's been composted. Now, these mushrooms don't really grow on the manure. The manure breaks down the straw, so it composts down the straw. Then you add what's called a casing layer. The casing layer has no nutrition. It's potting soil, basically, peat moss, but it's mixed with bacteria. And that triggers the mushrooms to fruit on top, which is cool. So once you cover that compost with this potting soil, you see the mycelium reach up looking for oxygen, but it's also recruiting bacteria in here, all right? And then that's what triggers it to fruit. So whenever you pick this one, this is a King Stropharia. We fruit these on wheat straw. Same method, you can fruit King Stropharia on wheat straw, just like an oyster mushroom. Now, this is a mushroom that typically grows outdoors on wood chips. But we've learned we can grow these indoors in pots. If we colonize the wheat straw and put a little bit of this dirt on top. See this little dirt here? These are the bundles. And so the fungus can be really wispy when it's young, when it doesn't have any microbial partners. But in this glass of water was the soil that I found it in, growing in. And then it gets really ropey, strandy, like nylon, you know, like this. It's recruiting. It's bacterial partners. Terms do this. All right, so if you're growing on like pasteurized straw, you can grow this one. This one is almond portobello. It's a tropical. You can grow this one in buckets. I mean, you garden too. We discussed that yesterday. But you can grow this on composted. Even your oyster mushrooms, let's say they fruit 4 or 5 times, you could take that, compost it, and then grow almond portobellos on the compost of the other mushroom. That's called species sequencing. And then all you have to do is let it colonize. You add a little bit of dirt. You see here, that's potting soil. You've got almond portobellos. This one fruits, it likes to fruit above 65 degrees, preferably 80 to 85. It's a summer mushroom. So you don't want to try this time of year. But if you want something really good, very interesting and different, pick up some almond portobello spawn, maybe in April or May would be when I would start those. This one is interesting. Now this is a tropical. You can see here, these are grown in bags. I mean, I would grow these in buckets. I think it's dumb to grow them in plastic bags. The buckets are more rigid and reusable anyway. But this is pasteurized straw, just like an oyster mushroom. Soaking straw, shredded straw in hot water. All right. Let it colonize in a bucket, let's say, or a nursery pot. It's going to turn all white. As soon as it turns all white, you're going to top it with maybe 1 inch of potting soil. That's it. And then you're going to mist it. Wet potting soil. I would take maybe a little scoop of your native dirt, mix it in with the potting soil so there's microbes in it. It's not just potting soil from the store. You're going to wet it, mix it, and giant milky mushrooms emerge from that culture. This mushroom is tropical. It will fruit above 85 degrees Fahrenheit, sometimes 90. This one is amazing. It tastes like scallops. It's a wonderful mushroom. We have cultures for this one. We're obviously not selling them right now. It's pointless. But I would check back in April or May, maybe even June for the giant milky. Again, it's simple. It's the same method as oyster mushrooms, straw, except all you're doing is adding a microbial casing soil on top. Another one on pasteurized media would be the paddy straw. This is another tropical. except this one grows outdoors and it likes to grow in beds. So what we did here, we have a pasteurized straw, and we have spent oyster mushroom substrate here, which is like spent cottonseed hulls. We repasteurized it after it was done fruiting. And so we have alternating rows of spent pasteurized oyster mushroom substrate, straw, cottonseed hulls, straw, cottonseed hulls. And this is the paddy straw spawn just being sprinkled here all over the surface. The plastic we have in the woods is twice as long as this row. So what we do is we'll spawn it and then flip it back over the top to cover this and make a little humidity tent. We'll leave the sides open so it can breathe, but we want high humidity. This mushroom fruits in 7 days, you know. So you'll get these mushrooms in about 7 days. This mushroom is about 40% protein dry. It does grow from a vulva, which, you know, the deadliest mushroom in the world grows from a vulva, except it's all white. The destroying angel has white spore print. This one has pink gills and pink spores. So you really can't make that mistake. It's very different. And that's also a reason we grow it on the plastic, not on the ground, to make sure nothing grows up from here from a surrounding tree. All right. All right, so some considerations with surface area and stuff like buckets. The more access a mushroom has to oxygen, the more mushrooms will fruit. That's why you don't let those little babies out of the bag, you know, that are trapped. The more holes you poke, the more pinning occurs. The top of a nursery pot is the same thing. So you need to cover this with something like a plate or a bucket lid or something to keep these little babies from popping up all over the place. This was an experiment we did down in Mepkin Abbey in Moncks Corner, South Carolina. We used the nursery pots as a mold, and then it just kind of took it over. It held the substrate together. We popped them out, and we tried to see what would happen, and then it was just a mess. There was mushrooms growing everywhere, and it was very low yielding, and they were very hard to pick, very hard to clean. So we like to keep them in the pots. If you're going to fruit in a structure, and I'll get to some basic stuff here in a minute, but small scale commercial, people are using storage containers, shipping containers. You would just put a door here, fans, AC unit, you know, lighting and humidifiers in there. That's all you really need. You need oxygen, you need light, and you need humidity, right? And you got to keep those insects out. Got to have insect netting. Something like this, it ain't gonna work unless you have a reflective shade cloth on this. Ideally, a greenhouse in the shade would be much, much better. But greenhouses in the full sun are just too much to handle. An alternative here would be for the environment would be something like a hybrid where you have aquaponics, maybe you have fish in here, and maybe you have mushrooms growing in a shady, you know, underneath the trays or underneath the bins. So then you have mushrooms creating carbon dioxide. You have the plants making oxygen, CO2, oxygen, CO2. So there's a nice turnover here. So in the winter, this is a good design. So much you wouldn't have to vent in so much oxygen into this area. I know this is buzz through this real quick, but it just shows concepts. This is out west. I mean, these are very hot climates. These are insulated hoop houses, and they've got fresh air coming in from a fan from the outdoors, and this tubing has holes punched in it, so it brings oxygen all the way down. Just minimal lighting. That's it. I mean, this could be your garage. This could be a spare room, basement. But what you can't do is humidify your house. That could be dangerous. So there's most commercial farms have these foggers like this, but think about a little rack, one of those little plant raising racks with plastic, that you can zip up and put a little humidifier in there, and then you've got a little growing space. You don't have to have a big space to do this. You can stack these. I like these bins, I really do, because you can stack them like this, and just water the sides, and then put plants in here. This is in one of our growing spaces. Oyster growing together. Just a wonderful, wonderful mushroom. Very easy to grow. The pinks only take 7 to 10 days to come out. Very quick. Also, shared space. This is golden oyster, white oyster, and reishi mushrooms we'll cover here shortly. That's sterilized media. But yeah, that's just a simple little rack that you could put somewhere in a sunroom, or not in direct sun, but in a sunroom, and you can just drape a plastic sheet over it and maintain humidity. It's very easy. I do have yield calculators that I use. If you're interested in commercial production, I would contact me. I'm not going to cover that today. Obviously, it's just ramping things up, but it gets into return on investments and things like this. But I do have a spreadsheet like this. If you're interested in it, it tells you the square footage you need, or what you need to, what you might need to build, what your cost would be, things like that. And I have different yield calculators for columns, nursery pots, trays, all kinds of different things. So I also want to say that in order to develop a space, if you were just growing a few bags or buckets in your home, that's one thing. But if you're thinking, oh, well, I want to grow for the market, you also have to think about space. And that's what that yield calculator helps you with. But there needs to be separate spaces for colonization and fruiting. So what you do is you basically have to understand the life cycle of these mushrooms. And we'll talk about it with shiitake later. But 2 weeks of colonization, there's 9 total weeks where it's in your hands. 3 weeks of flushing and 4 weeks of rest, that adds up to 9. So when you take the percentage, the reason I did this is because that tells you the percentage of the square footage of your space needs to be partitioned off. So I can make it very easy for everybody. If I have a 100 square foot space, I need 22 square feet colonization space. See? And then you add these up because they share the space. So then my fruiting space would be 77%, something like that. So it's good to know the cycles, right? Bigger is not better. Modular systems, you don't want big open spaces of bugs and vectors of disease floating around. You can just add more little spaces as you go. LED lighting is good. Very good electrical savings, very low heat. You can dial up the wavelength you want. You can just turn it to blue. And also, I just want to let you know that, mushrooms being the only non-animal source of vitamin D, if you grow, these are 2 clones. If you grow golden oyster in the dark, you get this, and albino. It's pretty much devoid of vitamin D, period. And so low light and high CO2 create stem elongation. If this mushroom on the left had a bright yellow cap, that means that the light was good in the room, but the CO2 was bad. So I can walk in, and mushrooms grow so fast, I can read a room fairly quickly, and so should you. You can make those modifications All right, I'm going to pull up another one on sterilization. Do we have any questions from the chat box that we want to field? I think I got 30 more minutes, correct?
Sorry about that. Yes, about 30 more minutes. Are you able to see the chat from your screen now?
Yes, I am.
So if you scroll back, there have been a few questions that have come in as you've been speaking. I'm trying to go back to see the first one that I see. Some introductions. Let's see. The first question I see. Okay, bear with me. There's a lot of chat, which is wonderful. Interested in things like lion's mane, hunted wild mushrooms. Might be a nice niche out there with chefs or some specific ones that are normally wild. Let's see.
Would a fluorescent light grow light work for growing? Yeah, for Mike, fluorescent light would work. It looks like a kind of spoil. Yeah, that's what I was using.
So do you see the one? Yep.
That one?
Yep.
2 questions. Do you put a lid on the bucket but don't tighten it? For anaerobic, I mean, you just let it sit. I mean, you can put a lid on it, but we really didn't have to. I mean, it just went rank. It was probably the grossest thing I've ever done. Besides like a fecal colic did a couple months ago. That was pretty gross. Really good. Just don't get it on you. It's the gift that keeps on giving. If it gets on your skin, it's like soap won't take it away. You know what I mean? It's pretty bad.
He's laughing at that. And there's one from Scotty and Donna Sweat. We have a field full of, oh gosh, broom sedge that we bush hogged into a mulch. Is this suitable straw to pasteurize and use?
Yeah, I don't know. It's worth a shot. It would perceivably be high in carbon, so I would try that. I would love to hear back from that. That's the beauty of everyone experimenting with it. So Scotty and Don, you were in my class yesterday. They couldn't get enough of mushrooms apparently, and yeah, and Scotty and Donna, just contact me through the website, Mushroom Mountain, and keep me posted on that. Want to help and give you some advice because I'm interested in that. That would be a worthwhile experiment. I've got a whole field full of it too.
Trying to see other questions.
And I have another.
If folks have other. Oh, you have one?
Another PowerPoint to pull up. So in about a minute or two, I've got to pull up. So it's a quick one. It's sterilization, difficult, but.
Sure. Let's see. Oh, they'd say they'd be at your farm intensive too if we could be placed at once. Yeah, for those of you watching, there will be an on-farm intensive tomorrow. I forget what time yours is at. Is it in the morning or the afternoon?
Afternoon. I don't even know when. 1 o'clock or.
Let's see on farm info. You guys are at. Yep, 1 to 4:30 at Mushroom Mountain. So for those of you who are able to go South Carolina tomorrow, there's still time to sign up. So let us know. All right. I don't see any other questions. So if you want to go ahead with your second PowerPoint, that'd be fine.
Yeah, let's do that real quick. Whoops. Hold on. I don't want to do that.
I see George asking, will there be another intensive opportunity with Trad in the future? Possibly. We, at least for the conference, we try to do on-farm intensives every year, but I'm sure you all have your own workshop series, I imagine. Is that true, Trad? Or Do you ever host things?
Okay. You can go and get our website if there's plenty of workshops listed there.
Awesome. All right.
All right. So, this one won't take long because it's more intense, and it's very hard to teach sterile substrates in even an hour and a half. So most of this is going to be in my book. I can't. There it is. Is that full screen? They're looking good?
Yep. Yep.
There's no music playing, by the way. That was for an online class, and I would put like the doors and stuff like that. I would have about that. Again, there is a huge section on sterile media here. So if you are just getting started in mushrooms, I would say start with the oyster mushrooms, because this is going to get trickier. You're going to need sterilizers and filters and things like that. So that's why I only we'll spend maybe 20 minutes on this. But there's a lot of information in my book on sterile environments. This is my lab. You don't need a lab like this. This is a big lab. This is a production lab. I will tell you right now, I have a lab in Jamaica. I have my an apartment in Jamaica, and my lab is in the living room. And I have a filter in there. I brought a couple pressure cookers down there, and I'm growing a lot of right inside my living room in closets and things like that. Guess you probably figured out what kind of mushrooms I'm growing by now. But anyway, if you're making transfers like this, I mean, transfers in a little still air box, you're going to get contamination. You put your cultures in there, and then you transfer them around after you take them out of a pressure cooker. I would prefer if you get like a laminar flow hood, not like this. You can just get a HEPA filter and a blower. So the filter would probably cost you maybe $300, and then a blower maybe $100. You build a little box for it, and there's schematic lines. So if you look up laminar DIY on YouTube, you can learn how to build your own hood. These hoods that you're looking at here are safety hoods. I mean, they're $7 to $10 grand, and you can make your own for about $300 or $400. And here's one here. Again, it's simple. The filter, a little box, and the filter goes back to here. And then there's an air space, and you would just put your blower on top of this, and it would just blow sterile air at you. I would just put some tape down here. So pasteurization is different from sterilization. Once you sterilize something, everything's showing up to the party. So you got to be really careful with contaminating the media. So we pour agar plates. This is gel. You can buy agar, and you can mix it with your brewing industry, malt extract, or even potato water. I'm sorry, I don't have a pointer. I'm sitting there. And then you add a little culture or spores here, and then it germinates, and then you radiates out. It's a nice pure culture. And then you have to go through some steps. So when you're dealing with sterilized substrates, you need to make your own spawn, essentially. So this is where you can buy grain spawn, but if you're making your own, you can soak it in water overnight. It swells up. This is wheat. You can use wheat, rye, or oats. I think we switched to oats because it doesn't contaminate as easily. But you soak it overnight, it swells, and then we rinse it off, and that gets rid of a lot of the juice. And then we put it into jars, canning jars. In Jamaica, plastic, those microwavable food jars with the screw tops, they work actually really, really well, and they stack. So you can use those as well as these, but these go into the jars. Definitely want to use a funnel, because you don't want to just dump this grain into a jar and it gets the juice all over the rim. and the threading on the outside, because that's a way that the bacteria can grow up and over the lip and get inside. So use the little funnel. You fill some jars. You can also fill bags. These are autoclavable bags. These are from Unicorn. You can Google unicorn mushroom bags, and you should be able to find these. We also sell them in smaller quantities. I would recommend that because I believe their minimum is a box, and there's like 1,000 in a box. So you can buy these online or with us. Just buy some to try. These are heat tolerant bags. They have a micro, so they can breathe. I like to fill them, 2/3 of the way. Fold them up very nicely. I put these clothespins on them, and I deflate them, and then we'll stick them in the pressure cooker. Now, this is how you make grain spawn, and we'll get to the sawdust blocks in a minute. So we sterilize them at about 15 pounds of pressure for 2 hours. And you take the pressure release button until there's steam, you stick it on. Then this goes all the way up to about 15. You don't start the clock, and so as soon as it hits 15, then you hit the clock and start the timer at 2 hours. All right. This is what the inside of the cooker looks like. You just use a pressure cooker. I've got some professional electric claves. They're like autoclaves. But even in Jamaica, I just took down the largest Presto pressure cookers I could find on Amazon. And at Walmart, I bought everything I could find. Ace Hardware, I bought 4 of them, and those are working just fine. What I like to do is put a little spacer in here, like a little baking rack or something to make space. That way the steam gets around all the bags, because you're going to put 3 more bags on top of this one. All right, so if you've never done into grain transfers before, and if you don't have to do that, if you buy grain spawn, you can go right from grain to sawdust later. But I'm including this as a little bit of an advanced additive here. This is a reishi culture. I can tell by looking at it. It's nice and flat. You would take this culture and you cut it up. And again, it's in front of the filter. You'd be wearing gloves. This is just a picture I took from my book, I think. I should have been wearing gloves. Shame on me. But you want to wear gloves, and you would cut it up, and then you would drop it into sterilized, cooled grain. Look at that. It's nice and fuzzy now. It's probably a day or 2 later. And then it's a different mushroom, by the way. This is a morel culture, so the color is different. So it wakes up and it starts to colonize the grain. Then you shake it up, and then it's fully colonized. Right, so now you have grain spawn. Now you can go from grain to grain. You can just keep making grain to grain to grain to grain, keep expanding the grain, or you can go up to sawdust or sterilized substrate. I added this morning because it was what we're doing in, we did this at the farm, but we also do it in Jamaica. And this is a jar with a plastic autoclavable or heat tolerant lid. And on the top, we've got a syringe filter, which acts as a breathing hole, or you can just drill a hole and get, if you go to the medical section of any grocery store or pharmacy, you can get micropore tape. That's breathable, like bandage tape for wounds. So you can just drill a hole and put like a 1/2-inch hole and put the tape, a couple layers of tape on this. It's breathable and it won't contaminate, but it'll breathe. So what we do is autoclave that, maybe 250 milliliters of water and a little bit of corn syrup. You let it cool, and then you drop the same wedges into the water, the nutritive water, and you just swirl it, a couple of times a day, and then this big cloud of mycelium forms in there. Then you can take a long syringe, and then just suck up the mycelium and inject it right into the grain. And you don't need fancy bags like this. I've actually just injected it into the bag, had a piece of tape ready, and as soon as I pull the syringe out, I just tape over the hole. So I don't even use injectable ports anymore. Anyway, this method, you really don't need a laminar to do. So once you get the auger into the water and shake it, everything is pretty much, you can do this open air. So I really like this method. So if you want to check into making liquid cultures, it's really, really cool. Having a lot of luck. So once you have grain spawn, you can start supplemented sawdust, like sterile culture. So we need to start by basically most of the sterile media is going to be sawdust. So you can use hardwood sawdust from a mill. You can use compressed, what do they call them, like smoking pellets or heat pellets from a hardware store. I bought a bunch of bags for a farm like apple and pecan and some other stuff from Walmart the other day just to prove a point that you can get the stuff anywhere. Now the sawdust alone won't be enough. You have to add supplements. So the supplements that I use, I go to a feed store and I get like a broiler feed or chicken scratch, and I mix in anywhere from 5 to 20% by volume. Now, I will tell you, if you're just starting out, I would start with 5%. The more supplements you add, the more susceptible it is to contamination. So I wouldn't go any higher than, even as a professional grower, it would possibly produce mold or bacterial blooms. So you would mix the sawdust with, let's say, chicken feed or soybean meal or something like that. And then you would fold those bags, the heat tolerant bags, and then you would sterilize it in a pressure cooker for 2 hours. Or you can super pasteurize it if you do not have a pressure cooker. And I'll show you options for that. All right, so this is a commercial autoclave. I mean, this thing is probably $20,000 to $30,000. You wheel the stuff in. Thanks. Let's just move on. I just made a decision for you. We've been using these here. These are from Bubba's Barrels. Let me check the time. 15 minutes, doing good. And these work really, really well. And we've got a big one of these. I can't remember what size we have, but it's pretty large. And we just stack. It's got a false bottom with a floating valve. It autofills water. It's got a heating element in it, and it also has a computer-controlled timer and everything. So we just load the bags in this thing. I think we can get like 135 bags in one of these 85-gallon containers, and it cooks overnight. The next day, we just pull the lab, and then we let them cool, and we sell them. So I really like these. If you're going to get into mushroom production, you can also do a DIY barrel. This is just a 55-gallon drum, and it's fitted with just a release valve from cookers. You know, it's rated at 15 or 20 pounds, and it's got a pressure gauge on it. And you can just fill this, put a false bottom or a rack on the bottom, and fill them with bags. So once you sterilize or super pasteurize your media, all right, you're going to sprinkle in front of your laminar, in front of your HEPA filter, a little bit of grain in each one, mix it up, and you're going to seal it. Use one of these sealers. You're going to seal the top. Now we use one that it's magnetic. It's got a timer here on the edge. It has a timer. It clicks down. You just let go. Automatically releases by itself, which is kind of cool. But yeah, anywhere from 12 to 16 inches. I would do the 16-inch to seal the bags. Now, once they're sealed, all right, some mushrooms need to cure in the bag, like they turn brown. And you'll notice this happens with shiitake mushrooms, by example. All right, so they will produce metabolites. You all see all this browning that's going on and this fluid? That is totally natural, right? And I would actually shake this bag around to get that fluid even more, like all over the surface to get it to brown even more. So they'll cure or turn brown in the bag, then they'll come out of the bag and then they'll fruit. So the shiitake is the only one that I take out of the bag. So once you take them out of the bag, your fruiting room, or if you're doing this in your bag at a time, I mean, you can still do that. If you have a little like plastic covered plant rack, obviously you're not going to fog the room. If you do have a fruiting room, here's another option. I think the most economical, best option, if you are going commercial, you would do aquafog. And if I'm going too fast, you can email me at Mushroom Mountain if you're thinking about commercial or need consultation or something like that. If you've got a commercial farm, you're thinking of calling me. Here's the other. See, here's the home option. I like this one. It's just a little, little humidity tent over a rack, and you've got a humidifier, and it just blows humidified air like into this little space, and then you just zip it shut. They've got some air intake here, but I mean, if you put bright light, fluorescent grow lights on here, hang a couple ferns in here, and you won't need to bring in fresh air. The ferns and the mushrooms will, metabolize. They'll co-metabolize the gases. So I like this little setup. It's easy. You can use that for the pasteurized one too, right? Your little oyster mushroom. So shiitakes are going to brown, and they're going to make their own bark in a sense, and they're just going to pop right through that dead outer layer, right? So shiitakes are going to come out of sterilized sawdust that browns. It's going to take them anywhere from 8 to 10 weeks to turn brown in the bag, and then you just take them out of the bag, and they're going to come out. All right, compare it really quickly to, we got 10 minutes, so I got to hurry up. To oysters, which remember only take 9 weeks of space. These take 17 weeks. Shiitakes need 6 weeks to colonize, 2 weeks to brown, so that's already 8 weeks. I mean, your oyster mushrooms you made at the same time are probably almost done, flushing 3 to 4 times. Then they're going to do 1 week of flush, 3 weeks of rest, 1 week. So you add all that up, and just like we did with the oyster mushroom, with shiitakes in particular, they need a lot of space for colonization. Look at this. So you're going to add browning in the bag. That's 47% of the space is just, they're still in the bag. They're not doing anything, right? And then another 43 is going to be 53 is going to be fruiting. So that's like half and half almost. Anyway, I think oyster mushrooms are definitely a way to go with yield per square footage, if that makes sense. Lion's mane, you can see it produces a yellow metabolite. Just you see that there in the bag. That's totally normal. The lion's mane take only maybe 3 weeks to fruit, and they'll fruit at least twice out of the 3 times. And we produce a lot of these at Mushroom Mountain for our extracts, the mycomatrix stuff. These are wonderful mushrooms that taste like lobster. Reishi mushroom, the mushroom of immortality. We grow these. Now you can grow these out of the side of the bags with slits, but now we grow them out of the top. Beautiful varnished mushroom. These are slow growing, and they take anywhere from 2 to 3 months to mature. So this is not a mushroom that grows really fast. It's not edible per se, but we grind them up and make extracts out of them. The last one, and there's many, many more, folks. I could go all day. there's enoki, there's bricktop, there's, black poplar. There's so many different mushrooms you can grow in sterilized media. This is just a taste of what's to come. Maitake, hen of the woods, very difficult to fruit. On a scale of 1 to 10, I would put it as a 10. So shiitakes, lion's mane is one of the easiest ones to grow on sterilized media, and so is reishi mushrooms. So again, if you have a pressure cooker and you could fill it with sawdust, wet sawdust, and then dump some grain spawn in there and seal it and shake it, and it colonizes, you're in business, A little thing about harvesting, you don't want to water right before you harvest because the caps get really wet. And if you stick them in the refrigerator, they'll rot very quickly. Always store in ventilated boxes, paper bags, things like that. Alternatively, the entire mushroom can be made into powders. You can make dried mushroom extracts, liquid extracts, soaps. We even make mushroom beer. And you can just dream up whatever you want. Solar dust, it really, converts that vitamin D into the tissue. And some mushrooms don't rehydrate really well, like oyster mushrooms, shiitake. They get kind of chewy. Maitake is very good. Lion's mane hydrates good, but some of the wild mushrooms are pretty bad. But they can all be made into a powder, which you can make into a flour of some sort for breading and tea or tinctures. I think I'm gonna have to stop there. We've got just a few minutes for questions. And if you want to reach me, you can reach me at mushroommountain.com. Right. I'll stop sharing there.
Awesome.
We made it.
We made it.
We made it.
Thank you so much. That I think that's going to help a lot. I know it's going to help a lot of people. I'm looking at the chat here. I don't see any new questions that have come in with the second PowerPoint, but if anyone has any, this is the time to ask them while we have a few minutes left. I did put in the chat there, you've mentioned your book a couple times. In our conference platform, there's a section called Speakers Books, and Trad's book is in there as well. So if you want to hop over there and check that out, I encourage you all to do so. Any other questions before we sign off? Or Trad, any other kind of parting words of advice you'd like to share?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I would say most that attended probably need to get started in the pasteurization arena. The sterilization just takes a little bit more equipment, It's just, I don't want to scare anybody away from that because, my book is a good resource. What I've just shown you is, listen, if you have a pressure cooker and make just a few minimal investments, like the filter, I brought everything down to Jamaica in my check-in bathrooms like within 2 weeks, 3 weeks.
Wow.
Came down there and in Jamaica and said it looked like Breaking Bad, or something like that. It looked like an illegal.
Any of the mushrooms?
What's that?
Did your landlord end up trying any of the mushrooms that you were growing?
No, she probably wouldn't want to do what I'm growing down there.
Okay.
Those are therapeutic mushrooms. I don't think she'd agree with them.
Well, great. Well, thank you so much for your time and just your knowledge and sharing everything with our audience today. Thank you for all of those who have joined us. And thank you again to South Carolina SARE for your sponsorship. And I do have a code for those of you who are playing the conference game. Let me just look it up. And let me put it here up on the screen. Bear with me, Trad.
And thanks everybody for coming. How many people do we have in here today?
I can't tell from this screen either. I can tell you after the fact, but I would have to exit out to go look at that. So here we go. Here's the code. It's going to be Niche Meats. That is your game code for this session. So anyway, for those of you playing, your game code is right here on the screen, all caps, niche meats. So thank you so
Say
much.
that 3 times in a row.
I know. I know.
I tried.
All right. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And I'm looking forward to hearing about how your workshop goes tomorrow. Tomorrow already. Yeah.
Yeah, it'll be fun. Yeah. If it's not too late, drive down and, see us. Awesome. And thanks again.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
Hey, guys.